Kuru me deva sarvakaryeshu sarvada. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. My humble pranams at the lotus feet of our most beloved and beautiful Master. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Om Sri Sai Ram. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our guest speaker this morning, who was really no guest or stranger to any of us, Sister Janani Srinivasan. I've had the privilege of knowing Sister Janani personally and have benefited from her encyclopedic knowledge in Sanskrit, the Shastras, and Puranas. Sister Janani has been incredibly generous in sharing her knowledge, empowering us, being an inspiration to so many of us, and is ever ready to help answer any questions that we have, for which we are ever grateful. A little bit about Sister Janani. Even before Sister Janani was born, Swami made sure he had established himself firmly in the hearts and lives of her family. Her father, Professor Srinivasan, was appointed by Swami as professor and head of the physics department of the Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning, and served there from year 1983 to the year 2002. She and her family have received, and continue to receive, innumerable blessings from Swami over the course of their association with him. Sister Janani studied in the Sri Sathya Sai Higher Secondary School in Puttaparthi from grade 1 to grade 12. Post-Parthi, she holds a B.sc and an MBA from the Rotman School of Management, Toronto, and used to work for a major Canadian bank. She currently lives with her husband in Princeton, New Jersey. Without further ado, I welcome Sister Janani for her talk titled, Out of Many, One.
Om Namo Bhagavate Tasmai Yataye Tachidatmakam Purushaya Divijaya Pareshaya Bhidimahi Yasminnidam Yataschedam Yenedam Yaidam Swayam Yosmat Parasmat Cha Parastam Prapadye Swayam Bhuvam. My loving prayers at the cosmic feet of my Zen master and Kurma Guru, Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai Baba. Thank you, Gayatri, for that introduction. It's always a pleasure to be amongst good friends, sharing, reveling in speaking of the Lord on this fine Sunday morning. In thinking of the unity of religions, in thinking of the need, if you will, for religion, the chant that I started with is from the Gajendra Stuti. The Gajendra Stuti makes its appearance in the story of the elephant Gajendra and the Srimad Bhagavatam. Swami would often extol the virtues of the Bhagavatam. In his inimitable style, he would describe an acronym, Bhagavatamu. Bhakti, the Bha stands for Bhakti, Jnana, Vairagya, Tattva Mukti Sagaram. So Bhakti, devotion, Jnana, wisdom, Vairagyam, detachment. And when you just list these words out, kind of making a laundry list of these words, it's easy to lose sight of the nuance and the difficulty to integrate these three elements in one's life. And each of them serves in a way as a touchstone of the other. How do you know you have true bhakti? Unless it's true bhakti is always tempered by wisdom, which is jnana, and it is reflected in your day-to-day life as detachment, right? How much are you able to stay above the fray rather than getting sucked into the day-to-day vicissitudes of life, the vagaries of life? So all of these, this triad of bhakti, jnanam, vairagyam, Swami used to say, it's a lifelong project to try to integrate that into one's life. And the Bhagavatam, the Srimad Bhagavatakyoyam, Pratyaksha Krishna Evahi. The Bhagavatam is the book form of the Lord. It's the Lord himself. And it only occurred to me later that today is actually Krishna Janmashtami. So depending on what calendar you follow. And so it's also fitting to think of the Lord on this auspicious occasion of his birth. So, and the reason we celebrate many of these occasions, especially in Sanatana Dharma, and even in other religions, why is it so important to celebrate the birth of Krishna, the birth of Christ, or Swami's birth? It's to celebrate the birth of that spiritual consciousness within each and every one of us. And Swami used to say this pun in Telugu, Bhagavatamu chaduvite, Bhaga avatamu. So you will become good, Bhaga avatamu, if you study the Bhagavatam. So
on the YouTube, no problem.
For all of these, for all of these reasons, this chant from the Bhagavatam, and it's put, the rishis of the Bhagavatam have put these words into the mouth of this elephant, this great elephant, Gajendra. Now, everybody, even a Balvika's child, knows the story of Gajendra, right? Everybody knows the story. Once upon a time, they lived an elephant. The elephant was going for a leisurely swim with his friends and family in a beautiful lake. From out of nowhere, a crocodile came and caught hold of the elephant's leg. And the elephant tried hard and fast, but the crocodile held on for dear life. And the elephant finally got so exhausted that it just let go. And the elephant said, "Oh Lord, come to my rescue." And Lord Mahavishnu arrives on his eagle, on the Garuda, and he severs the head of the crocodile. And the elephant Gajendra is freed, has attained mukti. This is the bare bones version of the story of Gajendra Moksham that everybody knows. So if everybody knows, what's the point? Why has the story kept generations of listeners, generations of seekers enthralled? If you delve into sort of a slightly closer reading of the Bhagavatam, the rishis have left us little clues all over the place. So, for example, the place where this takes place is called the Trikuta Parvatam. The Trikuta is the three peaks. And as soon as it says three peaks, you can imagine that it refers to the three gunas. So Trikuta is a metaphor for this world that we live in, which is composed of the play of the three gunas. So Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Sattva, or quiet purity. Rajas, activity. And Tamas, which is inertia or lethargy. To greater or lesser degree, this universe of the five elements is an interplay of these three gunas. So then when you say, oh, okay, let me map Trikuta mountain to this world that we live in, then it's not so difficult to realize that, hey, this elephant Gajendra is you and me. It's a samsari, right? Whether you want it or not, samsari is a title everybody can put on their resume, because that's what all of us are. We are caught here in this thing, right? That's what we are first and foremost. And this elephant in a previous life was a great king by the name of Indradyumna. And this king, as is the wont of kings everywhere, is very arrogant, is filled with arrogance, and in a careless moment is cursed by a rishi. The rishi says, even though you've taken human birth and you're a king, you're behaving with such carelessness, such arrogance. It's almost like an elephant just walking amok in the forest. And so maybe you need to go back to that birth and learn the lessons of that birth before you come back to human birth. Because in the traditional, in Sanatana Dharma, we believe in the theory of cause and consequence of karma, and that determines the births that one takes, right? Even in the Gita, Krishna alludes to this. So that's what happens. So this king is now Gajendra, this elephant, king of the elephants. And he's leading a very a wonderful life, because this place that he's been put in has everything that he needs. There's an elaborate description in the Bhagavatam of how this place is full of natural beauty, serenity, whatever, all his needs are there for him. There's water, there's fruit, and there's flowers and everything. And he's surrounded by friends and family that love him, that look up to him. And we can see ourselves in this when everything is going well in our lives. That's us, right? Everything is fine. For the majority of us, even this past year and a half, these past 2 years almost, that have been quite trying in terms of this pandemic that's been ravaging the world. The majority of us, we are in pretty good shape. We have a roof over our heads. We have, everything that meets our needs. So he's in that similar kind of a situation, and with nary a care in the world, as they say. And in this situation, one fine morning, he's just, going for a swim. He has everyone around him, and he's just enjoying himself. And all of a sudden, he realizes that a crocodile has caught hold of his leg. This crocodile, if you think of it closely, Makara in Sanskrit, has a lot of associations with the planet Saturn, with Shani. And Shani in Greek is also chronos, time, the word for chronology. So time, all of us that are caught in samsara, we are, at any minute, we will fall prey to time. And if you think about it for 1 second, right? The arrow of time always moves in one direction. This is why stories of time travel are so fascinating, because of their impossibility, really, right? Because the way the universe is structured is for all of us that operate in it, is for time to move in one direction. And you can see this in your own lives. Very simply put, the passage of time that creates increasing complexity, increasing trouble in your own life. When we are children, recently my nephew spent some time with us, and he's a delightful little chap. But the thing is that he, in his little world, right, he's very specific about certain things that he wants. Left to his own devices, he would just have his favorite foods at every meal. It doesn't matter what food is being cooked in the house, right? So, but the adults in the house have a different perspective. So that's his universe. That's the extent of trouble in his universe, right? Negotiating for something else that he would rather eat, negotiating for more screen time. These are all the different problems in that little world. And then as the arrow of time progresses, you can see it in your own lives. As you go to school, as you go to university, and as you start becoming aware of the world that you inhabit, every time you engage with the world, it's kind of troubling, because you're reading about accelerating environmental collapse. You're dealing with, or you see the fragility of the economy. You see how interconnected we are, and the problems that can also cause, right? The pandemic, a lot of it, whatever the reasons, has been exacerbated by global travel, right? And many of these things that we cannot live without are also involved in some of the issues that we're facing, right, to a greater or lesser degree. And then as life progresses, you become adults, you're navigating the adult world, you're entering professional life, you're getting married. So there are all these different things that you have to negotiate and navigate, right? People in different relationships to you. And all of these are varying levels of challenge. And then the unknown strikes, right? You have a major illness, you have some catastrophic thing that happens to someone in the family. All of these things, but you have to, as I joke, you have to have the ability to walk and chew gum, right? These are things that happen, but you have to deal with it. That's part of being an adult. And at some point, when the world becomes too much, like Gajendra, you say, you know what, enough. This is it. I have reached the limits of my strength, right? I can only do so much. I've come into contact with problems, intractable problems that are so huge, and they're inevitable, right? Problems of aging, problems of loneliness, all of these things we know, we see it in our friends, we see it in our families. You hear this constantly, oh, so-and-so is so good, why should this happen to them? But this is life, it does happen, right? And at that point, Gajendra says, Purushaya adi bijaya pareshaya abhidimahi. He says, whatever is that absolute, which is the adi bijam, which is the original cause for this whole universe, and which still stands apart from this universe, to that, tam prapadye swayam bhuvam. I surrender to that. I pray, I surrender. And this idea of surrender, you see it again and again throughout the Itihasas and the Puranas. You see in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna says, Shishyasteham shadimam tvam prapanna. I am your shishya, I am your disciple. I submit to you. I do prapatti to you. Like I completely surrender. And at that point, Krishna is ready to give him the message that he's ready for. So across humanity, no matter what the time, no matter what the place, no matter what the geography, these twin drives, if you will. One is this understanding our utter helplessness in the face of this vast universe, right? Understanding that and hoping for a sense of transcendence. There's got to be something beyond this. This cannot be all that there is, right? There's got to be something, because somewhere in the deepest recesses of our hearts and our minds, somewhere within, you know that there is so much more to this. It cannot be. The Lalita Sahasranamam says, Nama Rupa Vivarjita. So she who is beyond names and forms. So beyond this play of names and forms, this matrix, this Nama Rupa matrix, if you will, beyond this, there is something that doesn't change. There is something that's eternal, right? And this has been what religions across the board, right? They have been trying to understand this, to express this in different ways. When you this is 2021. So some 2000 odd years ago, when Christ was on the cross, he calls out in Aramaic, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Oh my God, why hast thou forsaken me? It's the same cry, right? It's the same cry that you hear from Gajendra. What happens to the young prince Siddhartha? He's leading a very similar to our King Gajendra, right? He's leading a wonderful, sheltered life. The king, Shuddhodana, his father, doesn't want to expose this prince to anything that might harm or that might hurt his sensibilities. And yet, when the time comes, you see this theme of time. In his case, the time comes and Channa, his charioteer, becomes the catalyst. And he sees the seeds of the awakening of the young prince Siddhartha is the same thing. He sees somebody who's old, he sees somebody who's ill, and then he sees a corpse. And then he sees somebody who is enlightened. So, and he says, the person who's enlightened, he says, this is who I want to be, because this person has transcended all these other vagaries, right? He has transcended. We worship God as Dvandva Atitam, Triguna Rahitam, right? Dvandva Atitam, somebody who's beyond the dualities of pleasure and pain, hot and cold, all of these gain and loss, who's transcended them, and Triguna Rahitam, this Sattva, Rajas, Tamas that we are so, it kind of makes us and shakes us, so to speak, like it's part of this world. But the Almighty, the Absolute, as conceived by every religion, is something that stands beyond this, right? When you think of Sanatana Dharma, any mention or Hinduism, the perennial philosophy, whatever you want to call it, we owe a great debt of gratitude to Adi Shankara. So Adi Shankara, in his very short span of 32 years that he walked this earth, also took, you might think that we are living in extremely complicated times, right? Where there are so many, where there are many religions, but there are also many secular movements, right? Vying for our attention and everything. And in that, so he came, his advent, if you will, his birth was also during a time where they were, throughout the length and breadth of what we know as the Indian subcontinent today, there were different religions, different cults, different practices. And some of them, thanks to him, today you can only read about it in books, right? Because some of them had extremely regressive practices. Sacrificing of human beings, for example, like really scary and terrifying things that we are lucky we can only read in books today, and they no longer exist. But these were all the things that he came in as a part of his, as a teacher, he noticed. So, for example, you have different parts of, say in India, where people worship different deities. He saw the commonality and he realized that, hey, all of you are actually worshiping the same thing. It's the same absolute. Some people may call it Ganesha, some people may call it, so he established what is called the Shanmata system. So as in the 6 main streams, if you will. So Shauram, which is people who worship the sun. So for the ancients, when he looked up at the sky and he saw the sun was what they call Pratyaksha Devam, God that you can see visibly, because the sun is there before you, it's going to be there after you, right? One of the prayers to the sun is Namas Savitre Jagadeka Chakshushe, this primordial eye of the world. Now, Jagat Prasuti Sthiti Nasha Hetave, you create, you destroy, and you sustain. You create, sustain, destroy. So Virinchi Narayana Shankaratmane. So the 3, Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the sustainer, and Shiva, the destroyer, all of them are embodied in you. So, and then, so Shauram, Kaumaram, which gives the same predominant spot to Kartikeya, the younger brother of Ganesha. And then you have the Shaktas, who worship the mother goddess, and then the Shaivites, who worship Lord Shiva, and then the Vaishnavites, who worship Lord Vishnu. This weekend, it's an important Vaishnavite festival. In fact, so much so, so it's not that those who believe in the one God deny the others. It's what's called your Ishta Devata, the God that is your favorite. You have some, because of a whole series of causes and conditions that you don't know, you are born into perhaps a particular family that has a particular Ishta Devata or a particular devotional practice, whatever it is. And so he recognized this, and he offered or systematized, if you will, different ways that people across the country could worship their own Ishta Devata. So much so that it was said of him, Antar Shaktaha, Bahir Shaivaha, Vyavahariketu Vaishnavaha. So inside, and this is how we are all asked to live. Antar Shaktaha, your heart, your should be filled with maternal love towards all beings. Bahir Shaivaha, externally, you should have So Shankaracharya used to be very austere, like a Shaivite, would have the vibhuti, the rudraksham, very ascetic looking. So your external mane, the way you present yourself to the world, should be a little forbidding, because in a way that will keep away people that you need to protect yourself, right? You don't want people messing with you for no reason, just because your heart is soft. And then vyavahariketu Vaishnavaha, right? Vaishnava Janito Tene Kahi Eje. This is Gandhi's favorite song, right? Who is a true Vaishnavite? Is one, all are one, be alike to everyone, who sees everybody in the same light. So this is how the different streams, you may see them as Shaivam or Vaishnavam or anything else. And now, but fundamentally, this everything, the thing underlying what drives all of humanity is really the same, right? Everybody wants the same thing. And then several thousand years after that, you see the advent of Buddha. And again, it's the same thing, because what happens is, initially, when a group of people coalesce, if you will, around a religion, right? There's a lot of enthusiasm, and you're following it in the way that it should be followed, so to speak. As in some of the highest ideals that a group of you thought made sense in every way, it's in your life. But over time, those practices start to degrade. And in the Ashtapadi, he says, Sadaya Hridaya Darshita Pashu Ghatam. It started getting to a point where to placate the gods, you're performing animal sacrifices. Deities don't want the blood of innocence, right? What they want, each of these things are your animal qualities to be sacrificed, right? In fact, we break coconuts. It's supposed to symbolize the breaking of your own ego, right? And so everything, all of these rituals had some inner symbolism. And so when the time was right, you saw the emergence of what then became Buddhism, which was basically an offshoot of what had been, because Siddhartha Buddha was Hindu up to that point, if you will, if you want to use that term. He was a Sanatana Dharma, he was following Sanatana Dharma. And he realizes, as part of his own awakening, that kind of a back to basics from his perspective was the source of all our problems is misery. Sarvam dukkham, sarvam shanikam. Everything is, life is misery, right? And life is temporary. So one has to seek nirvana. So one has to seek that which is beyond all of this. And then he prescribes the right conduct, the Panchashil and all of these different things, which we know today as Buddhism. So you can see, you can really apply this, think analytically about this with respect to any religion, and you will notice that for a particular time, for a particular place, that particular religion, in the form that it emerged and in the form that it evolved, was, so to speak, the need of the hour, right? I started speaking about Gajendra, the Elephant King, but I will also, just obliquely, I kind of want to talk about the elephant in the room, so to speak, which is that over the past few months, right, even ourselves, like, so growing up, so within the Sai organization, we've seen a lot of changes, right, a lot of differences, but it helps to remember that we're all fundamentally, sometimes the worst fights you have are between people you love, right? You fight the most with your siblings or your family. So it's similar, it's something similar, there's a similar dynamic here. So when we, growing up in Puttaparthi, in the primary school, our dining hall was filled with all these murals with different quotations of Swami. And every time growing, we saw these, there is only one religion, the religion of love. There is only one caste, the caste of humanity. There is only one God, he is omnipresent. These are sayings that Swami has said many times, and these used to be plastered all over the school. And so we always felt that we always thought of ourselves as extremely tolerant, right? And we had classmates, predominantly most of the children were Hindus, but we had classmates that were Muslims, classmates that were Christians. We were very good friends as well, right? So that never came in the way of forming your friendships or any of those things. In this very kind of hermetically sealed environment of the school, right? Everything, you never understood it. I think I was in the 11th grade when there was an inauguration. I think it was of a gym of some kind from the boys section. I think the year was 95 or so. And Swami, there was a discourse that Swami gave, and all of us had attended it. And this is when you're in your 11th, 12th standard. So you're kind of, you're old enough, you're in that teenage years, and you're seeing some of your seniors who have graduated from the institution. Many of them are coming back after 4 or 5 years. Some of them have been married. Some of them have careers, all of these things. So it's all there in your consciousness. You know that now you have to, when you leave the portals of this institution, these are things that you have to start thinking about, right? About who you want to marry and what you want to do, all of these things about your adult life. And so Swami, in this discourse, he says, students, you always think you can outwit Swami. You're always using Swami's words against him. He says things like this. They tell people, they find somebody that they want to marry. So he gives an analogy. He says, so you are a Hindu and you're in love with a Muslim and you want to marry this person. You want to marry this person. And then you say, as when your parents oppose it, you say, oh, Swami says all religions are one. There's only one religion, the religion of love. And then Swami says, but this is not, he says, but this is very, this is not clear thinking on your part. He says, because, and he uses the word in Telugu, culture difference. The culture is different. And he goes on to explain very practical difficulties, right? He says it's like Krishna Janmashtami today, right? If your partner is a Muslim, for example, they'll have no idea of what it is that you're doing or why. Similarly, if it's a festival for an Islamic festival, where, for example, it's common to eat meat as a celebration, right? You would find you would be revolted by it, right? Every fiber of your being will revolt against this thing, because that's not how you've been raised. It's easy to say that you don't have value judgment in a theoretical sense, right? But when you're faced with it in your real life, it becomes very difficult. And I remember listening to this, and this totally blew our minds, because we were like, hey, up to this point, it's all very simple, right? It's just a slogan on the wall. There's only one religion, religion of love. But here is Swami saying, it's not going to be that easy for you to put this into practice, right? You're going to run into real practical difficulties in trying to experience this in your lives, right? And so that completely, it brought home in a very real sense that you may have the best of intentions, and you should. It's a very noble idea. It's to remember that all of us are God's children. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. This is what Sanatana Dharma says, right? And if you look deeply into the core of every religion, whether it's Zoroastrianism, good thoughts, good words, good deeds, right? Every religion has, in some form or the other, the golden rule: do unto your neighbor as you would have them do unto you, right? We talked about surrender. The word Islam itself means surrender, right? Prapati, it's surrender. You agreeing that in this vast universe, you're nothing, and you're just you're submitting yourself to the will of God. So, but knowing it and bringing it to life are two very different things. And the second part, it's almost a lifelong project. So sometimes I feel, and again, I'm not in any way or shape, I'm not preaching about how people should be or not, but I'm just sharing my thoughts when I see the things that have been happening in the past few months in the Sai organization too. I feel like as long as Swami was here with us in his physical form, it's like, when you go to a tutorial class or something, the teacher is holding your hand, giving you all the previous questions and the answers and walking your way through. But then now it's the actual exam. So now after Swami, this is it. This is where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, right? And everything that he has taught us, everything that he tried to embody and live, this is what you have to actualize and bring to life in your own lives. How do I hold on to the core that is Swami. When you think of the motto of the United States, e pluribus unum, out of many one, the promise that the United States was founded on was this idea, right? The pilgrims who reached Plymouth Rock, there's this whole narrative. But many of the things they found that the old world was very stultifying, and in the new world, they could reinvent themselves, right? And right now, September 11th is around the corner, and it has very tragic associations for a lot of people, right? It's the 20th anniversary of something that became emblematic in our times of religious fanaticism gone horribly wrong, right? It became, but I want to think there is a different September 11th. September 11th, 1893 was when Swami Vivekananda addresses in Chicago, he addresses the Parliament of Religions. In his address, the thing that's famous that everybody knows is how he said brothers and sisters of America, right? But there's, he quotes, he doesn't quote, he talks about this line, which is from this act, but the actual quotation is from, it's a stanza from something called the Shiva Mahimna Stotram. We learned this when we were growing up in Puttaparthi. The Shiva Mahimna Stotram is a hymn to the greatness of Lord Shiva. Okay, and this this particular stanza says, Trayi Sankhyam Yogaha Pashupati Matam Vaishnavamiti Prabhinne Prasthane Paramidamada Pathyamiti cha Ruchinam Vaichitryad Raju Kutila Nanapathajisham Driname Ko Gamya Tvam Asi Payasam Arnavaiva. So what he's saying is, according to people's aptitudes, ruchi, according to their taste, people might follow different religions. Pashupati Matam, Vaishnavam, Shaivam, Vaishnavam. Trayi is a Vedic, just based on the Vedas, Sankhya philosophy, yoga, all of these different things. But he says, all of these they may Raju Kutilam, they can be straightforward or they can be zigzag, right? No matter what, know that all of these are like streams, Payasam Arnavaiva, which end in the same source. And this prayer is addressed to Lord Shiva, so it's the absolute in his conception. So all of these different streams, please know that they all end up in you, right? And so that's the note with which I would like to conclude, which is the idea that beneath all of this play of names and forms, this multiplicity, we are fundamentally one. Sai Ram.
Thank you so much, Akka. You covered so many wonderful points. Truly, it was fantastic. A lot of what you said, and your breadth of knowledge is really inspiring. We have a few questions that some of our devotees wrote in, and we just wanted to express them. Actually, it really well aligns with something you mentioned earlier, our first question. You brought up Adi Shankara and how he acknowledged that unification of diverse forms that are worshipped. And a lot of the times we as Sai devotees are presented with this idea, how we practice the unification of faith, tolerance towards others, love towards others. But a lot of the time religion itself, or at least sects in religion, occur as a result of diversification in thought. Somebody thinks I should worship the master only. Somebody thinks, no, the word of the master is all that matters. So forget the master, just focus on the word. So bearing these ideas in mind, when we interact with people that don't have exposure to the concept of unity of faiths, how should we act?
So first of all, I just want to dispel the notion that I'm somehow, I have an answer to any of these things. I'd rather treat it as mutually exploring the answers to these, because these are things that, I think one cannot just give a prescriptive answer, right? It wouldn't do much because a prescriptive answer may work for one person, may not work for another, may work in one particular time, may not work for another time, right? But I personally think in every interaction, I would say listen first rather than try to express, like, if you know what I mean. So sometimes you're coming from, for us, we are from the Sai community, right? There are others who are, say, from Islamic community or Christianity or something, different things, right? And for us, it's like fish in water. You're surrounded by it all the time, right? But to me personally, I don't think one should, I don't think it's effective. Let's put it that way. I don't think it's effective if one were to constantly try to push forward this, whatever it is, your particular viewpoint, whether the other party is, receptive or not, right? I would say one has to kind of listen to the other party. Like Swami himself, we can take our cues from how Swami himself was, right? You didn't have to be a card-carrying Sai devotee, so to speak, to enter Prashanti Nilayam, right? No matter what you were. There were people, there were atheists, there were rationalists, people of all different stripes. But for Swami, he was able to see the thing that united them, the common humanity that's underlying them, right? So that's kind of what that's the approach I would take, right?
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Another question that we received is, it actually alludes to what you said. As a student growing up in Swami's primary school, you see these quotes on the wall. And a lot of the times that's the case for all of us, right? We get to go and attend a center and we take for granted these structures, these quotes, the exposure that we have. And the whole point of these discussions we're having is a buildup to the construction of a Sarvadharma Stupa that'll be taking place at our center. And how do we avoid forgetting what these structures are supposed to symbolize? A lot of the times you go by, like the Olympics, for example, a lot of these countries build these elaborate stadiums that eventually are wasteful places. Like you see greens that just grow and forestry take over. I mean, hopefully we well maintain these beautiful structures, but a lot of the times it ends up being, we're driving to the center, we're coming for bhajans, we're coming for our activities. How do you keep at the forefront of your mind what these symbols are supposed to represent on an ongoing basis when you enter the center?
Right. So I was thinking about this notion of a stupa, like that's what you're building, right? As a pillar. Why a pillar, right? Why not literally anything else, right? A pillar symbolizes something that adds strength to a structure, right? If you think of our own human body, you look at your backbone is like a pillar, right? It's what gives, it helps hold you up, so to speak. It supports you. And then interestingly, the word for religion is dharma, but another meaning of the word dharma is also dharayati, that which supports, right? So religions religions evolved, if you will, to support people, right? The problem is, as with everything else in human life, we can't seem to get out of our own way, right? And what was meant to support you and nourish you and hold you up ends up suffocating you, right? So that said, though, something concrete, no pun intended, something out there, right, can actually be an active reminder every time you run into it or you bump into it. It's like sometimes you have pictures on the wall, right, or on your desk of people you love or of gods or something. Does that mean you're constantly thinking of them or constantly thinking? No, but in some subconscious way, it's always there. It's as they say, in the back of your mind. But there are times when you actually look directly at it and you're like, oh my God, wait, this is the whole point. I'm here, right? So again, like the answer is to make that effort, right? I think Gandhi was the one who said full effort is full victory, right? So to constantly remind oneself of that, so that it doesn't degrade or doesn't ossify into exactly what you're saying. And a pillar can be a support, but the word support can also be a crutch, right? One shouldn't use these things as crutches, rather as something that grounds you so you can be free, right? If your spine is in good health, the rest of your body is free. You're able to function. You're able to contribute to society. So it should be the same with these things. Religion should ground you, should give you strength. It shouldn't suffocate you and hold you back, right?
Thank you so much. And one final question is that a lot of our SSC students will be coming back to the center eventually, and we're starting our SSC soon. You as a young student that had the opportunity of growing up in India in a primary school in Parthi that is very different than the circumstances our students here would be subject to. And you travel the world, like you came to Canada and then you moved to the US. For a lot of us, we lived our whole life in Canada as youngsters and we don't have exposure to any other ideology. Can you give us one nugget that stuck with you as a youngster growing up, giving the exposure you had as a student in Swami's primary school as it relates to actually practicing love for others on an ongoing basis?
So, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And along the way, growing up, there are many instances that you see of people who have truly embodied Swami in their lives, right? So to me, and to many of us growing up, Swami was not as close physically compared to, say, our counterparts on the brother's side, right? So for us, the way I have kind of felt close to Swami is through people that love Swami, right? I've seen it I've seen it in the selflessness, like my grandmother, for example. Many of the teachers that were very selfless and sacrificed endlessly. I think of many of my teachers, for example, looking back, I can't imagine spending my 20s and 30s cooped up in a boarding school with lots of youngsters, with no private time, right? So these were the living examples, as they say, God is in the temple, but these are living representations of God outside. I've seen it in my parents' lives. It's this sense of finding connection, the actual act of finding connection in other people, and kind of having some sort of a healthy curiosity and affection for other people. I think this kind of a thing, it stayed with me throughout. And I found that when I was in Canada too, for example, I know a lot of us had lots of notions about the US, right? Even though I used to travel to the US, it's quite different from living in the US. But I have to say that these past 4-5 years or so that I've been living in the US have been a pleasant surprise. Ordinary Americans, interacting with them, making friends with them, you realize we have so much in common. Like in the neighborhood that I live, there's this Chinese grandmother in her 80s. Her life is very inspiring, right? She was a doctor in China, and then she's been here for the past 30 years. She's never practiced medicine here in the US, but listening to some of her life lessons, right? You realize that in many ways, some of the things that we thought were challenges are nothing compared to some of the challenges that other people are facing. And yet they've been able to call this place home, right? And it's having that common connection. And I feel like if I hadn't grown up the way I did in Parthi, we had a very diverse student body. And one thing I like to tell people is even the people that built the school, their children studied side by side, shoulder to shoulder with us, right? So we had people from all over the world, different countries, different faiths, different languages. And so getting out of that bubble and interacting with people outside, it's just, oh, this is similar. This feels familiar. This is something I learned, right? So, I mean, had I grown up somewhere else, would I have been the same way? I don't know, right? This is how I grew up and this is how I turned out. And I attribute it to that. This ability to find connection in places where you wouldn't think that there's connection, and it doesn't stop you from whatever somebody's age or ethnicity or whatever it is, right? Gender, you still are able to connect.
Thank you so much, Akka. Thank you for being an inspiration to so many of us, and your grasp over, or your mastery, I should say, over the English language and information itself, your ability to just so beautifully describe complex concepts in a way that make it easy for us to engage with is something we're all so grateful for, that have the opportunity to know you. I now have the opportunity to introduce Auntie Usha, who will give us the vote of thanks as well as our closing prayers.
Thank you so much, Dhanushan. What can I say? Janani, just like what Dhanushan said, there is one Trinyana Samandar who comes and gives us, when 5 years old, and there is most of us, we are still trying to find what it is. And like Dhanushan said, every time I hear you speak, whether it is just a phone call between both of us or in a forum like that, you simply amaze me. Just the knowledge, your understanding of Swami's teachings, the way you conduct yourself, you just don't talk, you just live that. I can feel that from you. So it's an amazing experience. And thank you so much for spending your Sunday on Krishna Janmashtami with all of us, talking about your experience and your understanding about what dharma, sarva dharma is. There are so many takeaways from this. The one thing I thought was, we talk about different religions. In its core, you said everything teaches the same thing. So for me personally, for that, I have to understand my religion first, so that in its core, what it is, and then understand what other religions say in its core. And our beloved Lord makes it so easy. Like how Shirdi Baba, every food will be served, and then he used to mix everything together and serve. Swami took the core teachings from every religion, put it together, and he gave it to us in a way it is understandable even by a person like me. So that is the beauty of this whole avatar, So I think the first talk we had was Brother Aruno's talk. He mentioned about it's not Sarva Dharma Stupa, is not just depicting all religions and all that. It is Swami himself, So what you actually said, what is Dharma? That which supports. That who he supports the whole universe, he is represented in that, pillar of strength for all of us. So I feel, as a person who is very particular, that our kids take something from that, I think that would be one of the lessons I take from that. That's as a guru, maybe that is what I would try to tell them. Every time they see that, it symbolizes Swami himself, and how we have to understand that in its core, all religions are the same. So you put it so well. I wish you could speak for another hour or so. So thank you so much for doing this, Janani. And I also want to thank my Gayatri for doing that wonderful introduction. And Dhanushan, as usual, the questions were spot on, what everybody felt. I think you shared that with everyone. And I also want to thank Sanjay for making sure that today's program went very smooth. Finally, I would like to thank my Sai Ma for bringing all of us together especially on Krishna Janmashtami, for making this happen. Swami, we thank you so much. And on behalf of the trustees, Brother Sudhakar, Sanjay, and all the executive team, again, I would like to thank Janani for spending this time with us. We hope to see you more often. Sai Ram.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Oh. Samastaloka Sukhino Bhavantu. Samastaloka Sukhino Bhavantu. Samastaloka Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Jai Bolo Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai Baba Ji ki Jai. Sai Ram, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the program. Sai Ram.